They had their hands on me before I even set down my coffee. Two men in tactical ice vests moved through the Greensboro bus terminal with the practiced certainty I recognized immediately. Not because I feared it, but because I had worn it myself for 11 years. The grip came first, fingers closing around my left arm through the sleeve of my jacket, and then the word papers barked into my ear before I'd even turned to face the man who said it. What happened in the next 6 minutes would end 2 careers, trigger a federal investigation, and generate a Department of Justice press release that got more shares in 24 hours than anything they'd published that year. But none of that was visible yet. What was visible was a plastic chair, a cold cup of coffee, and 2 men who had made a very specific mistake. I need to back up. My name, my real name, is Agent Darius Cole. United States Marshal Service, District Operations, 12 years on the job with the last 6 in undercover assignments that ranged from the unremarkable to the kind that still woke me up at 3 in the morning with my pulse somewhere in my throat. That Tuesday, though, I wasn't Darius Cole. I was Marcus Webb, 41, former logistics coordinator, traveling from Charlotte to Richmond to visit a cousin who didn't exist. I had been Marcus Webb for 9 days at that point. 9 days of vending machine coffee, bus terminals, rest stop diners, and chain motels with thin walls and parking lots that smelled of diesel and something older and harder to name. The operation was targeting a human trafficking network that used Greyhound and regional bus routes to move people between mid-Atlantic cities. My job was to find the connectors, the quiet ones who didn't carry the product themselves but made the logistics work, the invisible machinery. The Greensboro terminal was my 4th stop. I had arrived at 8:15 in the morning carrying a beat-up duffel bag that held a change of clothes, a burner phone, a dog-eared paperback I'd already read twice, and a false bottom containing a federal badge and a Glock 19. I'd bought coffee from the machine near Gate 4, black, 60 cents, tasting faintly of burnt plastic, and settled into a seat in the main waiting area with the particular posture of a man who had been traveling too long and didn't want company. Shoulders low, legs out, eyes down, not closed. The posture said, "Leave me alone." The posture said, "I'm nobody." It had worked 40-some times before. The terminal was the kind of space that felt like it had been built in the 90s and cleaned only reluctantly since. Linoleum floors the color of old mustard, buzzing fluorescent lights, one of them flickering near the restroom corridor with the rhythm of something about to die. The TV near the ceiling played a morning news broadcast at a volume calibrated to be heard but not understood. There were maybe 40 people in the waiting area. A family with 3 kids and too much luggage near the far wall. A man asleep under a baseball cap across 3 chairs. A teenage girl with earbuds in and her knees pulled up. A young woman nursing a baby in the corner. 2 elderly women comparing snack bags. A group of college students who'd clearly been up all night and were barely keeping it together. The usual geography of a Tuesday morning. I had mapped it in 90 seconds. The exits, the 2 security cameras and their angles, the single on-duty security guard near the main entrance who was studying his phone, and gone back to appearing to read my book. I noticed the ICE officers about 40 minutes after I sat down. There were 2 of them, both white, both somewhere in their late 30s, both wearing the kind of tactical vest that announced federal enforcement, even without the letters on the back. The first, the one I would later learn was named Briggs, was maybe 6'2", lean, with close-cropped red hair, and the expression of a man who had already formed his conclusion and was simply gathering evidence to confirm it. His partner was shorter, broader, wide flat jaw, the body language of someone accustomed to being the physical weight in a room. They were running a loop through the terminal in a pattern I recognized from my own training. Slow circuit, wide visual sweep, deliberate returns. Not random, not casual, hunting something. In the first circuit, they passed me without stopping. In the second, Briggs's eyes landed on me for 2 full seconds longer than they'd rested on the woman in the next seat, the sleeping man across the aisle, or the college students near gate 2. 2 seconds is nothing. 2 seconds is also everything when you spent 6 years reading rooms for a living. I turned a page in my book. I took a sip of cold coffee. My hands were steady. By the third circuit, I had confirmed the pattern. They had passed the sleeping man, objectively the most visually unusual person in that waiting room, 3 times without a pause. They had stopped briefly to exchange easy words with one of the college students and moved on. But each time their loop brought them back through my row, the eye contact returned. Deliberate. Assessing. I watched it happen in my peripheral vision with a sensation that was not quite fear, and not quite anger, and not quite the cold professional calm I'd spent years building. It was all 3 of those things layered together, and underneath all of them, something older and less clinical. Something I'd first learned to recognize at 14, on a different kind of street, long before any badge. On the 4th circuit, they stopped. Briggs positioned himself directly in front of me. His partner drifted left, not accidentally. The angle cut me off from the main exit without appearing to do so. It was a textbook soft containment setup, and the smoothness of it told me they'd run it many times before. "Traveling today?" Briggs said. The inflection was not a question. It was a notification. "I am," I said. I looked up slowly, making deliberate eye contact, keeping my voice flat. "Where to?" "Richmond." "You got ID?" Underneath my feet, in the false bottom of the duffel bag, the badge sat 2 inches from my right ankle. I ran through the protocol in half a second. Maintain cover except in cases of immediate personal safety. I thought about 9 days of work. I thought about the network we were 6 weeks from closing. I thought about the teenage girl who had pulled one earbud out and was watching now, and the woman with the baby who had gone very still. "Sure," I said, and drew the cover ID from my jacket pocket. Marcus Webb, North Carolina, issued 39 months prior. Spotless record. Briggs studied it the way a man studies a document he's already decided is suspicious, with the particular thoroughness of someone hunting a flaw, not confirming a fact. He turned it over, handed it to his partner, who gave it the same performance. "Marcus Webb," Briggs said. Not to me. Confirming something between the 2 of them. "What's your business in Richmond, Marcus?" "Visiting family." "What family?" I gave him the cousin's name from the cover file. Full name, address, the once-removed relationship, the reason for the trip, the approximate length of the stay. Clean, rehearsed, unimpeachable. Briggs listened without writing a single thing down, which was the tell I'd been waiting for. A cop running a legitimate identity check takes notes. A cop on a fishing expedition just watches your face. "You mind if we take a look in the bag?" he said, nodding at the duffel at my feet. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The baby in the corner made a small sound. Behind me a bus announcement began playing, tinny and half-audible. The whole terminal had contracted to this small circle of space, and I was the only person sitting in it. In the false bottom of that bag, a federal badge and a loaded weapon. If they found either one before I could properly identify myself, the next 60 seconds could go wrong in at least 3 different directions at once. I also had no legal obligation to consent to anything. "Actually," I said, and I set down the empty coffee cup with a deliberateness that made Briggs's partner shift his weight. "I don't think we're going to do that." The silence that followed was the kind that takes up more space than sound. Briggs's jaw tightened. His partner took 1 step closer. The teenage girl across the aisle had both earbuds out now, and somewhere in the back of my mind, behind the operational calculus and the cover story, and 9 days of accumulated patience, something very quiet said, "It's time." Briggs moved first, He took the duffel by the strap, didn't ask, didn't warn, just reached down and lifted it off the floor with the casual authority of a man accustomed to the world rearranging itself around his decisions. His partner stepped closer on my left, filling the gap, and I felt the geometry of the situation complete itself around me like a door swinging shut. Something went very still inside me then. Not fear, not anger. A crystalline, absolute clarity that I had felt only a handful of times in my career, always in the seconds before something became irreversible. "Put the bag down," I said. My voice came out quiet. That surprised even me. Not hard, not raised, just flat and final, the way you'd say the stove is on to someone walking too close to a burner. Briggs looked at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize. His partner made a short sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Sir, we're going to need you to cooperate with a routine." "Put the bag down," I said again. Same volume, same tone. Briggs said it on the empty chair beside me, but he didn't step back. Neither did his partner. The space between the three of us had collapsed into something tight and charged, and I was aware of the audience we'd accumulated. The teenage girl was fully upright now, phone raised in our direction, a complication and potentially a gift. The woman with the baby had shifted the child to her other shoulder and was watching with the focused expression of someone memorizing details. The security guard near the entrance had finally looked up from his phone. "I am going to reach into the bag," I said, loudly enough for everyone within 15 feet to hear. "I am going to do it slowly. I'm going to show you something, and I need both of you to look at it carefully before anyone takes another step. Sir, I'm going to ask you to keep your hands. I heard you. Watch my hands." I unzipped the main compartment, took out the paperback, the burner phone, the change of clothes, setting each one on the chair beside the bag with deliberate patience. Then I found the catch for the false bottom, 2 fingers pressing simultaneously on both corners, a mechanism disguised as a seam. The panel released. I reached in and withdrew the badge wallet between 2 fingers, raised it to eye level, and flipped it open. The gold shield caught the fluorescent light. United States Marshal Service. The silence that dropped over that corner of the terminal was the kind that arrives before sound can catch up to what the eyes are processing. Briggs stared at the badge. Harmon stared at the badge. I watched the information travel across Briggs's face in real time. The initial blankness, then a flicker of recalibration, then something that lived in the zip code between disbelief and shame, but wasn't quite either. "Agent Darius Cole," I said, snapping the wallet shut. "USMS, District Operations. I need both of your names and badge numbers right now." Nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. The baby in the corner made a soft sound into the silence. Near the main entrance, a woman in a greyhound uniform had appeared in the doorway and was taking in the scene with wide, careful eyes. "Briggs," the red-headed one finally said. The word came out smaller than anything he'd said before. "Number." He gave it. His partner, Harmon, K., badge 741, provided his with the expression of a man watching a building he thought was solid develop a very significant crack in its foundation. I stood up, 6 feet, unhurried, smoothed the front of my jacket with one hand while holding the badge wallet in the other. I looked at Briggs for a long moment, long enough to be uncomfortable, not long enough to become theater. "Here is what's going to happen," I said, in the same quiet voice. "You are both going to wait here. You are not going to leave this terminal. You are not going to make any phone calls for the next 10 minutes. And you're going to think very carefully about what explanation you plan to give your supervisor when I call mine." Briggs opened his mouth, closed it. His jaw worked once, silently, like a man who has run his entire internal script and found that none of it applies to the current situation. I picked up the duffel, walked 12 feet to a clear section of wall, turned my back to both of them, and called my supervisor. The conversation with Deputy Marshal Patricia Reyes took 4 minutes. She asked 3 questions. Her voice stayed professionally level for the first 2 and went very quiet on the third, the voice she used when she was deciding how angry to be on a delay. By the time I hung up, 2 things had been set in motion. A formal incident report, auto-generated the moment I'd entered their badge numbers into the system, and a call to the Greensboro ICE field office. That call, I was told later, lasted 11 minutes and did not go well for anyone on the receiving end. The teenage girl had recorded 3 minutes and 40 seconds of video. She uploaded it before Briggs and Harmon had finished giving their initial statements to the 2 ICE field supervisors who arrived at the terminal 22 minutes after my call. By the time the supervisors walked through the door, the video had been shared 14 times. By the time I sat in a Greyhound manager's back office giving my own account, it had been shared 1,400. By midnight, it would clear 6 figures and still climbing. I gave my statement calmly and completely, the way I gave all statements. The field supervisors were professional and visibly uncomfortable, which I respected. One of them, a woman named Castillo, sharp eyes, the posture of someone who had sat through many difficult meetings and intended to sit through many more, asked me twice if there was anything I needed. I told her I needed the operation documentation preserved and my cover identity formally retired. She arranged both. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, and stopped, choosing words carefully. "This isn't representative." I looked at her for a moment. "I know," I said. "It doesn't need to be representative. It just needs to stop happening." She nodded once and left. The internal investigation took 11 weeks. I cooperated fully, submitted the event log, the recorded call to Reyes, the terminal security footage, which had caught the entire interaction on camera, too at an unobstructed angle, and a written account of each of the 4 circuits Briggs and Harmon had made through the waiting area before stopping at my seat. The footage was, as Reyes put it in a call 3 weeks into the investigation, not ambiguous. The selection pattern was documented. The decision not to approach any of the other 40-some people in that waiting room, including the sleeping men, including 2 men near Gate 2 who'd been there longer than I had, was documented. Every second of it preserved on a government hard drive, telling a story that required no interpretation. Briggs and Harmon were suspended without pay pending the outcome. The suspension came down on a Wednesday. By Thursday, their names were in 3 news articles. By Friday, a civil rights organization had filed a formal DOJ complaint, and the ICE field office had issued a statement using the words "does not reflect our values" in the second sentence, which is the institutional equivalent of arriving to a house fire with a glass of water. I wasn't in Greensboro for any of it. I was in Richmond, not visiting a cousin. Closing the actual case. The network we'd been tracking for 6 weeks made its move 4 days after the terminal incident, rerouting through a different hub when one of their contacts went quiet. We'd anticipated it. I was already in position. The arrest came on a Friday morning. 7 individuals across 3 cities. 2 of them the connectors I'd spent 9 days looking for. I watched the lead agent walk the last one out in handcuffs into a gray Richmond morning and felt the specific, clean satisfaction of a thing that had actually been finished. Reyes called that evening. "Good work," she said. "We got all 7, I said. "I know. I mean both things." I stood in a motel parking lot in Richmond with my real phone, my real name, wearing my own jacket for the first time in 9 days, and thought about that for a moment. A bus rolled past on the street outside. The sound of it was ordinary and familiar and oddly settling. 4 months later, I sat in a conference room in Washington and gave a formal deposition in the disciplinary proceeding against Briggs and Harmon. 2 hours. I answered every question with the same deliberate patience I'd used in that terminal, and I watched the two of them sit across the table and understand, slowly and completely, the full weight of the decision they'd made in front of 40 witnesses, 2 security cameras, and 1 federal agent with 11 years of documentation habits, and a bus that wasn't leaving for another 40 minutes. Briggs was terminated. Harmon received a final written warning, a demotion, and a mandatory retraining assignment. The civil rights complaint resulted in a consent agreement requiring the Greensboro field office to implement documented stop protocols and submit quarterly compliance data for 2 years. Small. Insufficient. A step. The world moves in steps, when it moves at all. I still work undercover. Different cities, different covers, different duffel bags with the same false bottom. The work is the same. Sit, watch, blend in, find the invisible machinery. I am good at it, and I intend to keep being good at it for as long as the job asks. The last morning of the Greensboro operation, before I packed up and drove to Richmond, I went back to the vending machine near Gate 4, bought a coffee. Black, 60 cents, faint taste of burnt plastic. Sat down in the same plastic chair. Watched the same fluorescent light flicker near the restroom corridor with its slow, insistent rhythm. The terminal was unchanged, the geometry of it identical. What I felt inside it was not. I drank the coffee slowly. This time I finished it while it was still warm,